Rita is the founder and executive director of the Sister District Project, which she formed along with 3 other women 1 week after the 2016 election. A little background, Rita clerked for a federal judge in DC after law school. She worked as a federal public defender for 12 years, and she now lives in San Jose, California with her husband and twin boys. What impresses me about Rita is that she leads with such strength of purpose and calm resolve. With every setback, she reinforces that our problems weren't created in 1 year. And with every win, she reminds us that we must be prepared to continue this fight beyond 2020. So welcome, Rita.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here, to be talking to you guys. I'm on the West Coast out here in California. We're having a bit of a heat wave. So I'm kind of dressed for the weather, but this was so exciting. What a wonderful event. I have to, of course, give major kudos to the organizers. The Massachusetts Rhode Island team is just an absolute powerhouse. They have been for over 3 years now, and you all are so lucky to be a part of that crew. So I won't take up too much of your time, but I do want to talk just a little bit about Sister District and what we do. And then I also want to talk about our work in the context of this moment in 2020, where we find ourselves somewhat down the rabbit hole, and what it means and how we can kind of see our path forward. So I'm sure that many of you have been working with Sister District for some time and are familiar with the work, but for those of you who aren't, I started Sister District about a week after the 2016 election, and I'm a lawyer. I was a public defender prior to founding the organization. What really struck me in 2016, and there were many things that struck me in 2016, was that Democrats are a majority of the country, but we don't have a majority of electoral power. And it wasn't just that we won the popular vote for the White House, but lost the Electoral College. We didn't have the Senate. We didn't have Congress. We don't have the courts. We don't have a lot of the states. So why is this happening where Democrats are actually a majority of the country, but they don't have a majority of electoral power? I started digging into that issue, and there are 2 things that I kind of identified. Number one is that there are a lot of us who live in very blue progressive areas, and we've done what we need to do and elected progressive folks in our districts. And we feel a little bit frustrated and powerless because we want to do more, but what more can we do? And number 2 is, again, this concept of the fact that we are a majority, but there's a real imbalance in power because of structural institutional barriers to fair representation, such as the Electoral College and the fact that every state, no matter population, gets 2 senators. And so I just started thinking, how can we do something, particularly those of us in these deep blue areas? And the solution for me was Sister District, where we're going to organize people primarily in blue areas, but everywhere. And we're going to channel those resources to places elsewhere in the country where it can make a difference. We're going to fundraise for candidates in other states who are in really close elections where a little bit of a boost could make a difference. We're going to make phone calls. We're going to write postcards. We're going to knock on doors back when we could knock on doors in the places where Democrats are in a tight election against a Republican and they just need that little boost in order to get over the finish line. So that's what we do. We're called Sister District because we literally sister teams of volunteers in one part of the country with candidates in another part of the country to try to match up that energy and those resources with the need where it is. And Sister District focuses only on state legislative races. And there are a couple of reasons for that, which I think are becoming even more clear with every passing month. Originally, we decided to focus on state legislative races because looking again at this problem of representation where the majority of people are not represented by a majority of government, a lot of this comes down to the problem with gerrymandering and redistricting. And it turns out that states control redistricting. It is the state legislatures in 37 states or 34 states that draw the voting district lines, both in Congress and in the state legislatures. So you will see that there are a number of states where even when Democrats get a net majority of the votes, Republicans maintain control of the chamber, or they maintain a majority of congressional seats because they've drawn those voting district lines to favor themselves. And that really can only change at the state level. So that's initially why we decided to get involved in state legislatures, because of this issue of redistricting. But I will say that since then, an equally important reason has emerged, which is that states are really where policy battles are going to be fought for the foreseeable future. And just imagine, if you will, can you imagine Congress right now passing any sort of comprehensive legislation on anything? Gun violence prevention, the environment, healthcare, voting rights, women's rights, you name it, they're not going to do it because Congress is broken and toxic. Where those battles are going to be fought is in the states. And you don't even have to take my word for it. You can look at the progress we have made even over just the past 3 years. And the best example, the most exciting example is Virginia. And many of you have probably been involved in Virginia politics for the past 3 years. We got right into Virginia in 2017 to try to flip their House. We got very close. We got within 1 seat of flipping their House chamber. And then in 2019, last year, we went back, we finished the job. We turned Virginia into the first Democratic trifecta state in the South, which means they now have a Democratic governor, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic House of Delegates. And within 3 months, Virginia was able to do more than our Congress has been able to do in 3 years. Because when you have that power, that trifecta of power, you can move very quickly. And all of the legislation they passed earlier this year in 2020 went into effect on July 1st. And really, it reads like a progressive wish list. They eliminated the 24-hour waiting period for abortion. They now require universal background checks for buying firearms. They got rid of Lee Jackson Day as a state holiday, and they replaced it with Election Day as a state holiday. They made it easier to get an absentee ballot. I mean, these are things that are real changes for the people on the ground of Virginia. They happened in a matter of 6 months, and they happened because Democrats now control the state legislature. So this is not made up. This is not a pipe dream. This is actually something that's real. It's something that can happen. It's something that can make a big difference. And that is why we're focusing on the states. Now, I will say now in the context of 2020, we are seeing this in such clear focus, right? Because first we were hit with the pandemic and we had absolutely no leadership on the federal level for the pandemic. All of the leadership came from the state level. And we are seeing a real difference right now in the states that took it seriously and are following science and evidence-based practices versus states that did what Donald Trump did, which is absolutely nothing, make fun of it. And the thing is that this is not a joke. This is people's lives and people's safety. And it's no longer just a political game, at least not to me, not to us. But it really still is for the other side. And that really right now absolutely depends on who is in office. It is the Democrats that are the grown-ups in office right now. And they're the ones that will absolutely be saving lives when they are in control of states. And then of course you look at the civil rights marches that are happening right now, the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, these reforms that we need and have needed for decades, for centuries really, are again going to happen in the states. The federal government does not have the kind of power to drill down and see what each region and each locality needs. Those are things that are going to have to happen city by city, county by county, state by state. And these changes are going to depend massively, again, on who is in power in the state. We just saw in Colorado, which became a Democratic trifecta state in 2018, that they were able to quickly pass a number of reform measures in the realm of police reform. And I know that we need to go a lot further than just reforming the laws, right? I mean, we need actual structural, systemic rooting out of corruption and change. But these are things, this is how you start. This is how you even begin the conversation. And I will tell you that on the other side of the aisle, they aren't doing those things. And then of course, we have an election coming up in less than 4 months. And the big, big, big thing that I believe is going to determine that election is whether people are able to vote. And voting is something that is decided on the state level. It might not surprise you to hear that when Republicans gain power in a state, the first thing they do, it's not outlaw abortion, it's not try to get rid of gay marriage, they make it harder to vote. That is the first thing they do, because they're not stupid. They know that they are not a majority of voters. They know that them remaining in power depends on suppressing the vote. They really have to keep people from voting in order to keep themselves in power. And so what we have seen and what we'll continue to see is absolutely recognition of the fact that they cannot win if people vote. So they are going to make it as hard as possible. And you will see in red states, they enact voter ID requirements, and they eliminate polling places. They make it harder to vote by mail. In blue states, we're pushing for automatic voter registration. We're pushing to lower the age where people can register to vote and vote. We're pushing for weekend voting and long periods when people can vote. No excuse absentee ballots. These things really, really make a difference. So when you're looking at how can I make the most impact in 2020, my view is this. 2020 is a year unlike any that we have ever had, maybe in our lifetimes, maybe that we ever will. This really is the most important election we could possibly have fathomed. And yes, it is a presidential election. Yes, we need to win the Senate. Yes, we need to hold on to Congress. But the states are so, so important. And the great thing about working with Sister District is when you get the vote out for a state representative, you are also getting the vote out for all those important up-ticket races. Because if somebody goes to vote for their state rep, they're also going to check the box for that important congressional seat and that important Senate seat and that important presidential race. It doesn't always happen in reverse, because if people don't recognize the names at the bottom of the ballot, they often leave that blank. So the work you are doing is not something that you are doing instead of working on the presidential election. It is something you are doing to enhance our chances in the presidential election and in all the other elections. 2020 is also important because it's a census year. And that means that this is our last chance to elect Democrats to state legislatures before the next redistricting cycle that will occur in 2021. Next year, every state is going to redraw their voting district lines that are going to be in place for the next decade. We are still living with the lines that were drawn back in 2011, which were very, very bad for us because the Republicans smartly won a lot of power in the states, which is what we're trying to do right now. But this really is a once in a decade opportunity to win that power and the power in states that we need to bring fairness back to voting. So I know that sometimes it can feel like just reading the news is the same as being assaulted, and there is a tendency to want to retreat and block it out and just like go back to living life as normal, whatever that is. But what we're doing right now is the work that needs to be done. There is no normal unless we fight for it. There is no going back unless we fight. And we don't want to go back, we want to go forward. That doesn't happen unless all of us do our part. It can feel overwhelming. And what I would say is that no one person can change the fate of what's going to happen, but all of us doing our part and working together can change it. And if we don't, then we have for sure handed the other side a victory. So this is hard work. If you feel exhausted and hopeless and tired, that's normal. All you can do is keep doing what you're doing and then do a little bit more and bring your friends in to do it as well and keep hope alive. Honestly, I'm not a particularly optimistic person, but something I've learned in this work is that you have to have hope, because if you don't believe that change is possible, if you don't believe there's something on the other side, then you're not going to have the motivation to keep pushing forward. So those are just a few of my thoughts. I know you guys want to get back to your wonderful, wonderful program, but I just want to thank all of you so much so much for all of your hard work and your contributions. And I promise you that your contributions, no matter how small, matter, because we're all doing that work together. So thank you again so much. You're all so wonderful. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening.